Rodin's The Thinker, the eternal symbol of the human mind. A nude man of powerful muscular build sits atop a formless rock. His pose is iconic. Torso tilted forward, chin resting on the back of his right hand, while his right elbow anchors itself on his left thigh or knee. Though seemingly static, this posture pulses with palpable internal tension. Every muscle appears taut, bearing witness to the physical strain that accompanies intense mental focus. The thinker's face is partially obscured by his hand, a deliberate choice redirecting attention from facial expression to the body's gestural language as a vessel for thought and profound introspection. His left hand lies slack on his left thigh, as if to emphasize the total channeling of energy toward intellectual labor. His bull-like neck strains forward, while his back, a sculptural arc, radiates primordial strength. The stance evokes deep inward reflection, a near-creative agony, an inner turmoil made manifest through the figure's monumental physicality. This is not the calm of a sage, but the urgency of someone wrestling with a burning thought. The thinker is muscular, nude, absorbed in a silence heavy with questions. Auguste Rodin initially shaped him as Dante Alighieri, the visionary poet hunched in meditation over the abyss of hell. Yet today, this figure, tensed in a gesture of absolute concentration, has become far more than a homage to the Divine Comedy. It is the very symbol of the human condition, suspended between fragility and strength, flesh and spirit. It all began in 1880, when the French government commissioned Rodin to create a monumental door for a museum that, in the end, would never materialize. The artist chose Dante's Inferno as his muse, seeing in Dante not just a poet, but a sculptor of words, capable of carving characters through lapidary gestures. For nearly 4 decades, Rodin labored over the gates of hell, populating its panels with 186 tormented figures. At the center loomed Dante in high relief, a 70-centimeter tall man, chin resting on his fist, gaze fixed on the damned souls below. The intent was to depict Dante immersed in profound meditation on his monumental work, The Divine Comedy, and on the world of suffering and damnation it portrayed. But the project remained unfinished, and the brooding Dante began to take on a life of his own. By 1888, extracted from the door, the poet transformed into a nameless man. Rodin renamed him The Thinker, elevating him to a metaphor for modern humanity. He transformed it into an archetype. No longer a medieval poet, but universal man, caught in the act of wrestling with an idea. The figure's nudity stripped it of temporal identity, elevating it to a symbol of the human condition. This emphasis on physicality suggests a radical reinterpretation of thinking as an all-consuming, strenuous activity that engages the entire being, not just the mind. The muscular tension, deep concentration, and aura of suffering radiating from the figure have been interpreted as the physical manifestation of the anguish of creativity. In this light, the sculpture represents not only the act of thinking, but also the fatigue, doubt, and solitude that often accompany the creative process and intellectual pursuit. This decision to isolate and elevate the thinker into a monumental, standalone work allowed the sculpture to be appreciated and interpreted on its own merits, freeing it from the narrative constraints of its original context. It was this shift that paved the way for its extraordinary global fame, enabling the public to engage directly with its expressive power and complex symbolism, beyond its original role as Dante, judge of the damned souls. A powerful body, modeled after a real person, the French boxer Jean Baude, where every muscle betrays the strain of thought. Rodin infused it with revolutionary physicality. The body is not a shell, but the very instrument of thought. He thinks not only with his brain, the sculptor explained, but with his clenched fists, curled toes, and arched back. A revolutionary idea, meditation not as an ethereal act, but a physical, almost heroic one. Behind this vision stood the great Michelangelo. During a trip to Italy in 1875, Rodin had encountered the statue of Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence's Medici Chapel. The Duke portrayed with hand to chin, a pose blending majesty and melancholy. From Michelangelo, he inherited the non-finito technique, rough surfaces, half-sketched muscles, turning matter into a metaphor for unfinished thought. This choice was neither accidental nor a sign of negligence. On the contrary, it aimed to preserve the freshness of the initial impression, infuse the work with greater expressive power, and suggest the creative process itself as though the form were laboriously emerging from the material. Michelangelo's Non Finito, with its ability to evoke potentiality and becoming, found a modern interpreter in Rodin. In The Thinker, this technique can be read as a visual metaphor for the very nature of thought. A continuous process, never definitively concluded, an inner struggle that manifests in sculptural material. The form, therefore, not only represents a man thinking, but embodies the very act of thinking in its unceasing dynamism. From Dante, he drew narrative drama. "I lived an entire year with Dante," Rodin confessed, molding figures that seemed to emerge from bronze like souls from fire. This gesture, inherited from Renaissance art, traced its roots to antiquity. Odysseus and Penelope on Greek plaques, to Dürer's Melancholia there, or Heraclitus in Raphael's School of Athens, had embodied reflection through that touch of the chin. Rodin reinterpreted it, fusing Michelangelesque vigor with a vibrant, almost impressionist realism, where the bronze's uneven surface seems to pulse with life. While traditional sculpture had long focused on depicting divinities, heroes, or idealized allegories, Rodin brought universal human experience to the forefront. The Thinker, despite its monumental scale, does not portray a specific mythological figure in its final conception, but rather the universal act of thinking. This shift toward human experience, expressed through raw and powerful naturalism, paved the way for more personal and psychological thematic explorations in 20th century art, freeing sculpture from the subjects prescribed by academic tradition. The Thinker's fame exploded after Rodin's death. The first was molded in plaster, but it found its voice in bronze. Rodin authorized dozens of castings, democratizing access to art. The first large-scale bronze cast was unveiled in 1904, followed by over 25 replicas scattered across the globe, from Paris to Tokyo, Buenos Aires to Istanbul. One copy was even commissioned by Dr. Max Lind, an ophthalmologist and patron, who in 1907 asked Edvard Munch to paint it, transforming the sculpture into an icon within an icon. Rodin's decision to create monumental versions of The Thinker, independent of the Gates of Hell, radically transformed the sculpture's perception and impact. The scaling process was technically complex and often executed by specialized assistants, such as Henri Lebosset, who used tools like the Colas machine, a type of pantograph that allowed precise reproduction of forms at different scales. This enlargement was deemed brilliant, as it elevated a figure originally part of a larger ensemble into a standalone monument, granting it a commanding presence and visual authority that amplified its symbolic resonance. The shift in scale was not merely a matter of physical dimensions, but a deliberate, modern, artistic strategy employed by Rodin. This approach reflected a broader transformation in how sculptures could be conceived, produced, and disseminated. The use of assistants and mechanical means for scaling enabled the creation of large-scale original multiples, marking a departure from the traditional notion of a unique, irreplicable masterpiece carved entirely by the artist's hand. Two events in particular marked the public history of The Thinker, underscoring its potent symbolic charge. The first was the installation of a monumental bronze cast in front of the Pantheon in Paris in 1906. This gesture, born of a public subscription, affirmed the sculpture's national and civic significance. Rodin himself interpreted this placement as a social symbol, and it became an emblem of democracy and the power of thought. The statue was later relocated to the gardens of the Musée Rodin in 1922. A dramatic event marked the history of one of the American casts. In March 1970, a Thinker statue displayed outside the Cleveland Museum of Art was severely damaged in a dynamite bombing. A rudimentary bomb exploded at the sculpture's base, causing significant damage to its feet and pedestal. Spray-painted graffiti reading "Off the Ruling Class" was found at the scene, suggesting political protest during a period of intense social tensions and anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. After careful consideration, the museum made the significant decision not to fully restore the sculpture, instead exhibiting it with the scars of the attack intact. The damaged thinker thus became a layered symbol of thought, of Rodin's art, of cultural heritage, of violence against art, and of a specific historical moment of unrest. It compels viewers to confront not only the ideal of thought, but also the fragility of culture in the face of social conflict, adding a further, painful layer to its already rich narrative. Yet the thinker's true power lies in its polysemy. During World War I, painter William Orpen reimagined it in a harrowing watercolor. A soldier seated amid battlefield debris, his gaze hollow, body bent by the absurdity of war. In the 1920s, an American magazine recast it as a woman solving a crossword. In 2014, Marvel turned it into an introspective superhero. Even advertising co-opted it, sometimes reducing it to grotesque caricatures, other times reinventing it, as in a 2007 car-bodied version. This remarkable adaptability demonstrates how art that transcends its original intent can become a cultural milestone, upon which society projects its own ideas and anxieties. The truth of the thinker, therefore, is not singular but plural and dynamic, continuously enriched with new interpretive nuances. The thinker is present in some of the world's most prestigious museum institutions and significant public installations. The Musée Rodin in Paris naturally stands as the central hub, safeguarding a vast collection of the artist's works, including original plaster models and notable bronze casts of the thinker. The monumental bronze version displayed in the museum's garden is particularly renowned and widely photographed. Another location of profound personal significance is Rodin's tomb in Meudon, where a cast of the thinker serves as an epitaph, reflecting the artist's intimate bond with this creation. In the United States, the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia houses one of the most significant collections of Rodin's works outside France, featuring a prominent thinker that greets visitors, and many other important museums around the world. This widespread presence underscores the universality of the thinker's message and its status as a global icon. The thinker continues to captivate audiences and provoke reflection because the themes it embodies, the solitude of contemplation, the anguish and exaltation of creation, the perpetual quest for meaning, retain a startling relevance. In an increasingly frenetic and fragmented world, the image of this man absorbed in his thoughts calls for a pause, a return to inwardness, a recognition of the human mind's enduring power. Today, as a replica watches over Rodin's grave in Meudon, the work continues to provoke. Because that ancient gesture, cast in bronze, speaks a universal language. It is the emblem of a humanity that, despite uncertainty, never stops seeking answers. And perhaps, as Rodin suggested, it is in the tension between flesh and thought that the secret of its eternity lies.